meeting is being recorded.
All right, so you heard the voice, you've heard it a lot, and we're going to get started. It's 8:32. I'm Justin Paperny with Prison Professors and Earning Freedom. We're grateful that you're with us. I'm going to continue to let people in to the webinar that we're going to jump in and reiterate some of the obvious, because hardly a week passes without someone reaching out to tell us they were unprepared for something. Yet we have covered that extensively. So everything our team is giving to you comes at no cost. So I like to open our webinars by covering a few obvious things. One, this is recorded. We encourage you to watch it in the future. So if someone has a surrender date of 6 weeks or 2 months out, it may be a good idea to watch it again or watch snippets that relate to you. Further, there are questions in chat. Someone texted to tell me due to their precarious situation, in other words, they don't know what's going to happen with their case, potentially testifying. They want to attend the webinar, but don't want to be known. You can join anonymously. You can ask the questions anonymously in chat. We're going to respond to them and not mention your name. All good, no problem. Technology sets up. We can do just about anything here, which is a good thing. So reiterate the obvious. We are adding tons of free resources to Prison Professors. Our partner, Michael Santos, has been on the road exhaustively, that's if I said that correctly, traveling the country, educating, inspiring, teaching people in custody. While there, he's continuing to produce tons of content that I encourage you to go through. So much like people may spend 5 or 10 minutes a day on Netflix or whatever the number may be, our team highly encourages you. I'm begging you to spend some time every day on Prison Professors, because it's all free. As you know, I run White Collar Advice, which is a sponsor. I'm going to mute everyone as people are talking and unfortunately coughing. I hope everyone is okay. One moment. I will mute everyone, and then when it comes time to speak, we'll transition back to that. Hold on one second.
Yes.
So I encourage all of you to continue to spend time every single day on Prison Professors. Read a blog, listen to a video, understand what it takes to advocate and manage your way through this system. And if you can allocate just 5 or 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, slow and steady wins the race, tortoise in the hare. You will be prepared for sentencing, you will be prepared for prison, but it does require you to do the work, not just coming to these webinars. It's what you do in between these webinars, the questions you ask, and what you're learning that really matters. Additionally, have to reiterate the obvious. We can't change the past, cannot change the fact that you're involved in a government investigation. And we want to teach you how to advocate, because so many of you on this webinar, and I can relate to this, look back with regret on their journey. The lawyer you hired, the way that you prepared, you expected a shorter sentence, whatever it may be. We want to teach you how to advocate, but never look back with regret and say, I wish I knew then, which is why we're here to prepare you. And frankly, have some very tough conversations, which includes having to do the work. If not, it's just an hour of happy talk every single week. And then you move on and you come back next week and we have to cover what we covered previously. So please invest the time to learn. I sent out an email this morning where someone kind of said a joke. It was kind of a joking text, but also a little like, hey man, this is a webinar. I'm going to prison. I don't want to hear about sentencing. I've already been sentenced. I want to talk more about post-sentencing and RDAP and First Step Act and Second Chance Act and how the hell do I get out of there? The government's already ruined my life. I abridged the text without getting into all the swear words in detail, but he's like, I want to know how to get out of prison early, which is why we're also going to discuss steps to prepare for sentencing if you've not been sentenced. But moreover, if those of you are thinking, I've already been sentenced, why is he going to cover it? It's all related, because our team has interviewed Chris Maloney and other subject matter experts who will tell you the first thing your probation officer will do is read your probation report. They may reach out to the person who interviewed you for your probation report. So if there's a chance you weren't prepared for that interview because your lawyer told you it's a 10-minute interview, happens a lot, or if you don't feel as if you responded appropriately in that interview, the probation officer with whom you are going to want higher levels of liberty, more travel, perhaps work as an entrepreneur instead of going to work at fast food for minimum wage, as some of them kind of force you to do, especially if you owe big restitution as I did. So even if you've been sentenced, the work that you did leading up to sentencing is crucial by way of the pre-sentence report. And if it's no good, no bueno, and you know likely what was said, that's okay. That's why we're going to work to change it in the post-sentencing process. And thankfully, if you have yet to even be sentenced, you have a chance to influence it even further. So to help guide this conversation for 5 to 8 minutes before we get into talking about the first 30 days in prison, I'm going to call on our client, Kent, a friend of our team. He spoke last week, so I'm not going to go through that whole process, but I do want to focus on a few things that Kent did leading up to sentencing that helped him get the shortest sentence. So Kent, please, as kind of summarize as you can again, what the government asked for, what you received, and then why we'll get into some specifics of why you got a shorter sentence, but also how that sets the stage moving forward. So Kent, thank you for contributing.
For sure. Good morning. So I'll start with kind of the time frame and get you straight to it. So I got a target letter in February of 2019, ended up getting indicted in September of 2019, and found Justin and the team about a year after that or so probably around 2020. And started doing the work and kind of preparing for looking like I was going to be taking a plea, and all the way up until taking my plea in March of this year, and then actually had my sentencing date on November 9th, just this past, a month ago from now. And all the way up until the government was requesting and asking for 57 to 71 months, and ended up being sentenced to 15 months. And I just this past week ended up getting my paperwork. So I'm actually going to be surrendering to Morgantown Prison Camp on December 27th to start my time at the camp. But to kind of lead into this, Justin, and I'm happy to answer any questions where you want to go, but a lot of people ask me what was the one thing, or what's the one thing that I did that I think influenced the judge or made this thing go differently. And I would say, I don't think it was one thing. I think it's after going through the process and doing all of it, I think it's covering everything as best you can. It's not just paying a bit of restitution when you owe it. It's not doing just volunteer work to do it. It's not just having a job. It's not writing a narrative. It's all of that stuff combined, because I don't think every judge is going to be the same. What influences one may not influence the other, but I think the best way to kind of set yourself up for success, both in getting a shorter sentence, but I would say equally, if not even more important for myself and my own kind of mental health, was having a plan for the second part of my life, like knowing that, this is going to suck and I don't want to go to prison, but at least I've got a plan coming out of this thing that I'm going to be successful. And I was able to articulate that to the judge. And I think that made a difference. So
let me jump in, because Kent said some salient points that relates to all of you, everyone going through the criminal justice system. Michael's traveling today and speaking, and sometimes he gives me a hard time. I love him. He's my partner. If he feels like I'm talking about how much he does or his accomplishments, he's like, I don't want to hear all that. It's not about me. It's not about me. So thankfully he's not listening, so I can talk about things that he did well that can benefit all of you without feeling as if I'm stroking his ego, which he does not like. He does not want this to be about him. It's about impacting hundreds of thousands of people traversing this system. That said, if there's one way to describe Michael Santos, it's authentic, both good and bad. Mistakes he's made, what he would do differently, sharing that with stakeholders, lessons learned. That level of authenticity is key, because then when he corrects or pivots, he can show how he did it. It's the documentation. And we're going to talk about reputation management here in a little bit. I share this because when I came home from prison, I had no money, no clients, nothing to do. I would cold walk into law firms to peddle my book, and I would attend sentencing hearings both in Orange County and Los Angeles. It was the greatest learning lesson ever, frankly, more beneficial than the 1 year I served in a measly minimum security camp. And I heard all of these sentencing judges fillet defendants at sentencing. Fillet, I mean, embarrassed to the point where some of them were like, just give me the damn sentence so I can get the hell out of here. The reason some of these judges, like Judge Selna, who just gave Michael Avenatti 14 years in prison 2 days ago, or Judge Carter, another judge in Santa Ana, or Judge Wilson, who sentenced yours truly to 18 months, or Judge Gutierrez, who gave one of our first clients 6 years in prison because Judge Gutierrez said, I think you're telling me what I want to hear. I don't believe this is the first time you've done it. I think you've done this a lot before. You just got caught. And I think you're telling me what I want to hear. And if I give you what you want, you're not going to follow through on the commitments you made to me today. 6-year federal prison sentence. Everyone's like stunned. What the hell happened here? So what's the point? If there are things you told your judge you will do at sentencing, it's essential that you build a record that shows that you continue to do them. Because Judge Selma, Judge Carter, Judge Pearson, and others will say, I'm going to check on you when you're done with probation. Judge Carter actually tells people, I want you to come back into my courtroom and tell me what prison was like and how you're doing. And if you're doing well, I may let you off probation early. I may grant, I'm going to help you out if you've done the work. So if you are leading up to sentencing, of course, you've got to do the obvious, and we have myriad free resources on how to do that. You have pled guilty, identify with victims, demonstrate your remorse, share lessons learned, and most importantly, articulate why you will never return to another courtroom. That's typically done by way of the personal narrative, not the sentencing memorandum that your lawyers are paid to produce. Your personal narrative should augment the memorandum that your lawyers write. Further, even if you've already sat for your probation interview, in some cases, we've had clients who were, days before sentencing follow this path, getting the narrative to your probation officer. Why does that make sense? Well, if Chris Maloney, a subject matter expert we interviewed, told us on a video you can watch, the first thing your eventual probation officer is going to do is call you the probation officer that wrote your report or read the report. Does it make sense for your eventual probation officer to read this very compelling narrative that you wrote, that identifies with victims, that lays out a plan of what you plan to do moving forward? Does it make sense? Further, if you haven't been sentenced, you want to get the narrative in your probation report because that probation officer is going to recommend to the judge how long you'll serve in prison. Probably makes sense to influence that person. And all of you who have been sentenced most likely heard the judge open your sentencing hearing by asking, have you read the probation report? Yes, Your Honor. It's sickening and stunning how many people have not because they didn't prepare for it. So when I speak of authenticity, we want you to be authentic leading up to this probation interview, leading up to sentencing. Kent did that beautifully. He worked to the point where Kent, going through difficult circumstances in Ohio at his own expense with money, frankly, he didn't have, chose to board a plane to come to California to tell his employers, knowing that he was going to get fired once he told them that he pled guilty, knowing it was a dead end, still spent money he really didn't have to come and shake hands and say, thank you for the opportunity. I pled guilty. I understand this should cost me my job, and it will, but I just want to come out and shake your hand and thank you for the opportunity you've given me. Kent, I was stunned that you did that. A lot of people wouldn't. Can you just quickly walk through how your then new former employer perceived you as a result of making that effort? And do you still think they're in your corner as a result of that work?
It was a lot. So so to give a little clarity on this is my plea and everything is in healthcare fraud. So I was in healthcare sales position. And when I went out to California, they knew I was indicted. And we were able to talk through some of that stuff over the phone. But prior to me taking the plea, it was one thing to, innocent until proven guilty, at least with my employer, was great. They stuck beside me. But prior to taking the plea, I went out there to tell them I'm going to have to take a plea. And as much as they wanted to stick beside me, they said their attorneys were going to have to let me go. So I ended up losing that job in March, but didn't burn the bridges and was able to have the COO of that company write me a pretty beautiful character reference letter that talked about my integrity throughout it all, how she wished she could have still continued to work with me, that she would hire me if she had the chance again, hopes we have the chance to work together again in the future. So I don't know. I mean, that was one of 15 letters that I submitted. So I don't know. Again, it's impossible to know which letter or what part of it influenced the judge the most. But I would say that just, trying to do all those right things, I think made a difference for sure.
We may never know, but the point is you did it. And this experience
Right.
is coming. It's going to end. And there's value in having done and having done the work. So coming back to this idea of authenticity, if some of you hate your probation report, and some people on this webinar have called us to say, my lawyer told me if I disclose history of drinking or alcohol, the judge would frown upon it. I didn't prepare for the interview. I'd never heard of a narrative before. My lawyer told me it's a 10-minute interview. My lawyer's a former US attorney who apparently knows the judge and prosecutor, so he's got it all handled. Hardly a week passes without someone reaching out to say, wow, I'd love to learn from you guys, but my lawyer's a former AUSA. He's got it all covered. He told me there's nothing I need to do, which of course is a totally different message from what federal judges have told us. So if you did not prepare properly and you've already been sentenced, or if you're about to get sentenced and you have a lawyer that is not willing to take your advice or your insights or the narrative or let you mitigate, we empathize with you. I'm sorry. Your job post-sentencing, when your lawyers will go dark because they're not even involved in the process in prison, is to be authentic and work to recreate the record, to be able to articulate in your release plan, which we'll get into today. With your case manager in prison, letters you will write to your probation officer. It could go something like this, and our team worked on this with someone. Mr. Probation Officer, I did a terrible job of preparing for sentencing. I blamed others. I didn't fully understand how my conduct impacted people. I outsourced all of the work to my lawyer. And all I did was focus on how my own life was imploding rather than the people that were hurt, including my family. I made it all about Joe. And you know what? Now that I'm in prison, it's not all about Joe. And the questions are making it all about Joe is part of the reason I'm here. So I was a fool and fraud leading up to my sentencing hearing. It's the reason the judge gave me 71 months instead of the 57. Here's my plan to do better. If a probation officer reads that, that is an honest, authentic message. No different from when Michael Santos would tell you that he perjured himself when he was 23 years old on the stand, and he believed his lawyer who said for the right price he can get out of prison. And when he got to prison, he wanted what everybody else wanted, to get out. And then he found a philosophy book, treasure trove of philosophy. You've got to show the growth. So if you've done a great job leading up to sentencing like Kent, awesome. Congratulations. You are on a path to get out of prison earlier and to get off probation earlier. If you did a horrific job, I'm sorry, doesn't mean we can't work to recreate the record. Do it authentically, do it honestly, but don't continue to placate. Don't continue to act like you're sorry, but you're not, because it was Judge Wilson who said, you want your cake and eat it too. You cannot have it both ways. Make a choice. That's why I wanted to address leading up to sentencing and what happens next. Now, as we transition, and if you have questions about it, the great thing is we have tons of videos. They're all free with Judge Boo, with Judge Bennett, with Hugh Hurwitz, the former director of the BOP. It's all free. Invest the time to do it, but be authentic, own it. And the more you do that, the more doors that will open for you, and the more you'll separate yourself from people who say, I'm sorry, I didn't have bad intentions, because that's what most people say. We know you didn't have bad intentions, but here you are. Be different, think differently, and you'll be on track. I'd like to transition into the first month in prison and open with a story. Now, this was not someone who was in our community, but the wife called hysterical, as you would imagine, because we see what's sensationalized on television with prison, and it's certainly nothing like that in the minimum security camp. But if you look at our TikTok, our white collar, prison professor comments, people think it's party time. You're going to a club fed under the idea that problems don't exist because you see a pickleball court, a tennis court, a bocce ball court, a nice track. People think it's nice and easy that you're going to a fat farm for a while or big boy timeout. It can be big boy timeout if you like, but it also is a dangerous and potentially problems will follow if you don't invest the time. So before I tell you the story, let me share with all of you. If you do not watch our webinars on disciplinary infractions, you're not prepared for prison. If you don't watch our webinars on the First Step Act, you're not prepared for prison. If you don't understand how to deal with staff, you're not prepared for prison. And we've all given it to you for free. You just need to watch it. So I received a call from a wife who was crying to tell me that her husband, like many people, including me, surrendered to prison out of shape. 2 years he fought his case, put on 75 pounds, finally excited to get to the camp, a little over the top excited, a little too zealous, gets to the camp, gets out of, he was in quarantine for 2 or 3 days, gets to the camp, and someone says, hey man, see you walking the track. Would you like to join our exercise class? You got like Taebo, sit-ups, some pretty cool classes actually. And the guy's like, yeah, that would be fantastic. Doesn't consider, well, what is the class? Does it cost anything? What are expectations? God forbid, 4 days into prison, he says, no, thank you. I'm okay. I'm adjusting. He could always join the class at a later date, but wanting to impress, jump in, join the team, he says yes. And foolishly, at the end of the first, apparently abs class with some push-ups, tells the instructor, this is phenomenal. This is like better than any instructor. This is just phenomenal class. Like, you should teach this when you come home. I don't know. And the guy's like, I'm really glad you like it. It's like $50 a month for the class. And this is a broke prisoner. Many of you are broke. It's the reason we give everything away for free. He's like, well, I'm trying to get money from my wife to send me a couple $100s a month for commissary. Like, I just thought you invited me to the class. No, it's $50. You love it. That's $50 a month. It's $50 a month. I'll give you a list. I need you to buy things for me in the commissary. It's $50 a month. And this prisoner who had 9 years left kind of pressured him, put him on the spot. And the new prisoner, 4 days into his prison term, 4 days. And many of you may think this is crazy. It's not. I made tons of dumb decisions. Most people do because they're not prepared. It's a foreign world. He says no. And within a week, unfortunately, this prisoner who turned down the $50 a month was caught with an iPhone. Now, of course, the wife would say they set him up. He didn't really use an iPhone. They found it in his locker. Someone went to staff. They searched it. They found it. This poor guy's in the hole. He'll come out looking like Casper the Ghost, and he's going to get transferred. And he may lose his good time. Why? I don't know if he was set up. Probably. Who knows? That is a horrific, tragic story for a guy who wanted to go to prison to lose 75 pounds and get in better shape, all because he attended a class without thinking it through, gloating over how wonderful the class is and telling the dude, no, I can't pay you $50 a month. I ain't got it. Whole prison term derailed. Now, I want to counter that with someone who watched our webinars, who has 4 young children, devastating experience, contemplated suicide, 4 young children, wife is standing by him, thankfully, practically living in a trailer, like in Mississippi, terrible experience. And with his young kids, prior to his surrender, he wrote 10 letters because he read Earning Freedom by Michael Santos. He wrote 10 letters to his kids, and he asked his wife, on the first 10 days of my prison term, I'd like you to read this letter with our children. And he shared one of them with me, and it kind of makes you cry. It's very tearful. But essentially, I read like day 4. But like on day 4, he's like, I know I'm not home. This is my fault. I know you miss me, but this is day 4. And I promise you, this is what I'm doing today. Well, I'm 600 miles from you. On day 4, I will do this. And he essentially said, I won't just be reading a book. I'll be writing a book report on the book that I'll send home. He learned that from Earning Freedom and Michael Santos. I will exercise today for no more than 2 hours because I want to exercise in dosages that I can maintain when I come home. So I will have exercised today. I will have written a letter to my network thanking them for standing alongside me, because I can tell you people with whom we have helped with character reference letters, they say this to us. I still feel used by my friend who I wrote a letter for. They call me out of the blue, they need a letter, we write it, then I don't hear from them for 3 years until they need a job. I feel used, I feel like they're still taking advantage of people. I can see why they're going to prison. I'm going to continue to nurture relationships with people. That is what day 4 looks like in prison. I'm not going to complain. It's my fault. And it's so beautiful. They have these 10 letters that set the whole stage for his journey. So I encourage you, pen and paper, before you go in, consider doing something like this person did, who most likely live in damn near a trailer in Mississippi with 4 young kids and broke. If he can do it, you can probably do it too, if you find value in it, but also if you're willing to do the work. Don't wait that you're going to do something and then not actually do it, because then it's just going to set up heartache and disappointment for people. That's the value of documenting the journey. When Michael Santos encouraged me to write in prison, he said, the reason you're going to do it is because you're going to expect the world to hold you accountable. And if you don't do it, you're a fraud, you're a liar. You are exactly what people think. If you put it out there for the world to see, you have people holding you accountable, and you'll do it on days that you don't want to. So that's a horrific and great story I want you to think about. Now, as we come back to the first 30 days in prison, there is a chance you will still quarantine, whether you are vaccinated or not. Is there anyone here who has been quarantined? Scott, Laney, Sam, did you quarantine when you went to prison?
There was no COVID when I went. Although I must say, Justin, and this is something we should discuss, I got to the camp in Miami on a Friday at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They claimed not to have had my paperwork. and put me in the shoe until Monday because they said my paperwork, I got there too late. They wanted to get out of there and my paperwork hadn't gotten there yet. So I wound up going to the shoe until Monday, which was quite an initial introduction to prison.
Yes, Sam someday will write the book of do the exact opposite of everything that I did preparing for sentencing in prison. I'm glad we're laughing at his expense, Scott. Thank you. Excellent work.
Yeah.
So to the quarantine, I mentioned we had someone who's in our community, Jonathan Roffe, surrender to Miami. And Marcus, I know you sent a message. Why was someone in quarantine? Jonathan was fully vaccinated. He was in and out of quarantine in a day. Jonathan, in that email I sent out to everyone, said he met someone who was in quarantine for 7.5 weeks. And unfortunately, that person, he got COVID. Karen John sent me a separate email that said that the dude was fully vaxxed and boosted, but he got COVID. And then like he got out and then like he tested positive for COVID again. And then he interacted with someone who had it and they sent him back. And before you know it, this poor guy's in quarantine for 7.5 weeks because he had COVID. Can't change the fact that that may happen. I share that with you so you can manage expectations with people. Brian left a message here. I quarantined for 21 days in July 22. Brian, if you're comfortable engaging, because some people who are going to go to prison may quarantine, or if they get in trouble and go to the hole and get locked up for a disciplinary infraction, like the dude who got caught with the iPhone. What was quarantine like, Brian, if you can summarize for us? If not, that's okay.
Yes, sir. Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Tell us about quarantine.
Okay, quarantine was at Oakdale, Louisiana, was a 24-hour lockdown for us. We were stuck in of course, in a cell, a 2-man cell, and we were allowed to shower 3 days a week. So it was every other day and then one day on the weekend. We did not have access to telephones except for on the weekend, which was one call on a Saturday. That is pretty much the experience. Of course,
Brian,
limited to commissary items also. I'm sorry.
Brian, if you don't mind my asking, and just be authentic and be honest with us, how did you manage that with your family? When you would call home, would you say, this is horrific, this is awful, I thought this was a camp or a low? Or did you just say, hey, this is part of the journey, I can handle this, I've been through so much already? What was your mindset like enduring 21 days in quarantine?
It was difficult. The first few days were, they were fine because I'm like, okay, hey, I was prepared to, 10-day quarantine. And once it got beyond that 10 days, you start to panic, or I started to panic. I'm like, man, what's going on? You ask the staff, hey, will I be getting out of here soon? No one seemed to have a definite answer for me. Everyone's answer was, hey, that's above my pay grade. And it started to get very frustrating. And also for my wife that was expecting a kid, she's wondering like, hey, did something happen to you? I can't get a hold of him. No one's telling me anything. So it was very stressful, especially for myself and my wife. So there was no contact with family except for on the weekends.
So Brian, thank you for contributing. Our whole team is grateful. Here are some takeaways from what I'm hearing. I want all of you to manage expectations of your family. Arthur Merson, who is in our community, our team just got his email from prison. He's been in more than a month. He presumed he'd have access to email probably in a few days. What happened, as you may have read, someone at the camp in Tucson obtained a firearm, got that firearm into visitation and tried to shoot someone. Now you may be thinking, this is a minimum security camp. This is party time. This is club fed. A camper got a gun, tried to shoot someone. It didn't, frankly, the firearm didn't work. But as a result of that, everyone in the camp went to the higher security prison. They were in lockdown. And finally, I think after a month, correct me, Sam, if I'm wrong, but after 4 or 5 weeks of being in prison, Arthur finally has access to email, and he has endured a month in prison, worse than I ever endured, because I went straight to the camp.
And he had a 15-month sentence. So a
15
substantial
month
part of the sentence was in lockdown.
So I want all of you to manage expectations for your family. Now, while I don't expect campers to get guns and try to kill people in visitation, it is not unlikely that you may not have access to email for 2 or 3 weeks, or your family may things happen, manage expectations. I know a lot of people didn't manage expectations properly for sentencing because their lawyer said you're going to get probation. They get 4 years, which is still better than, below the guidelines, but they're devastated because they were expecting a certain number. Manage expectations. As we get back to the first month in prison, then we're going to transition back to some reputation management and how it aligns with this mitigation arc for the whole journey. I would encourage you, whether you're in or out of quarantine, to immediately look for a job in and around the compound once you clear admissions and orientation. Can Scott or Sam tell what is A&O? Is that like a big deal? Can someone offer advice on what the A&O
Sure.
process is like?
Admissions and orientation is when at my camp, the counselors led it. They pull together everyone who's shown up to the prison in the last, say, 2 weeks. They sit you down in the room. They run you through the rule book. They tell you as many of the rules as they can, and they give you the rule book. At that point, you're expected to know every single rule in there. You've been informed of everything when you get that book and you sign off on it. That's about it. Sam, maybe you have something else to add. I just think the big takeaway for me was once you're handed that rule book, you need to know it inside and out, because any CO on any day can ding you for any one of those rules that you violate. And you can't say, I didn't know, nobody told me. Well, yes, you were told. You received the book.
So each camp is a little bit different in how they enforce it. The Miami was very lackadaisical. Having said that, I will encourage everyone before A&O to find a job, find something that will occupy your time and you want to do. Because if you don't, you will inherently be assigned to the kitchen, and you'll be assigned to the kitchen for at least 90 days. But if you're proactive and you walk around with other guys there and see, well, maybe I want to work in education or rec or landscaping or transportation. If you're a proactive, come A&O, you can present to the counselor a request from whoever heads that department you want to get a job in and say, look, Mr. So-and-so, I have an approval to work as a driver, or I have approval to work in HVAC or to work in landscaping. And it shows you're being proactive, and you also avoid being placed in the kitchen. So it's okay to be proactive when you get there. Walk around with some of the guys that have been there. Keep your eyes open and find what might be something that interests you that will keep you occupied while you're there.
So I have evidence of how that can work. Now, I can't guarantee that it will work for you. I cannot do that. But, as Michael told me in prison, when I wanted to write letters to my probation officer, and guys were like, don't write letters to your probation officer. No one will ever read it. And I tell Michael, and he wasn't always so nice in his response, but he helped me understand why I needed to do it. So I'm going to tell you how this works. So Jonathan Ruffet, who just surrendered to the Miami camp for 4 years, I shared that email with you about where he said someone was in quarantine, and he sent an email. I won't read the whole thing because some of it's personal, but at the end of the email, he essentially says, I did exactly what you told me to do in the webinar. While I was getting ready to clear admissions and orientation, I walked around the compound looking for opportunities for work. And he's fortunate to have a really nice case manager. Staff in prison can be supportive. They can be. And he found a very nice case manager. Now, he didn't go up and introduce himself the first day. Hi, I'm Jonathan. Nice to know you. He's not speaking to staff any more than is necessary, because there's downside from that. They're not your friends. They're there to warehouse you potentially, but that doesn't mean they can't be supportive. And he found a very supportive case manager. So he walked in, said to her, I have found an opportunity. He wrote cleaning the visitation room, which, by the way, would be like the easiest job in the history of jobs. Okay, that's like the home run of jobs, better than being a baker at 4 o'clock in the morning. And the case manager said, let me confirm there's an opening. There was. And at the end of his message said, great news. I went through A&O and she approved my job cleaning the visitation room. Fantastic. Why? Because he didn't wait for a job to get assigned to him, which would have been the kitchen. He was proactive, walking around the compound looking for work that was open. He walked into his case manager's office and said, I've learned there's an opening working in the visitation room. May I apply? She confirmed there was an opening. Boom. This job may take, Sam, you were in Miami. How long would it take truly to clean that visitation room?
So there's interesting about the Miami visiting room. It takes about an hour a day. Oh gosh, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. However, The nice thing about Miami is there are vending machines. So if you have guests, they can, or friends, while you're in there, because you can be in there during visits, they can buy you food and drinks while you're sitting there waiting for the visiting room to empty. So there are certain jobs that are better than others and provide benefits that are somewhat atypical. And the visiting room orderlies, maybe you work 3 hours a week, because a visiting room doubles as the RDAP room, but it has additional benefits.
So I think it's phenomenal news, and I applaud Jonathan for doing exactly what we teach on our webinars, which is to be proactive, knowing the case manager could have said, thank you, but all new prisoners go to the kitchen for 120 days. That plan worked. Now, sometimes it's be careful what you wish for, because as we talk about the first month in prison, and our team believe what you do in those early days sets the tone for the whole journey. If you wake up late, you're going to continue to wake up late. If you associate with guys that complain and blame other people, blame staff, blame the judge, blame the prosecutor, blame the lawyer, habits are hard to change in life, especially as we get older. So what you do early on matters. So if you find a job that is an hour or two a day, some people are, as I just said, be careful what you wish for, because if you're not proactive for the rest of the day, you could become bored stiff, where you are literally may feel like you are going insane because you have so much free time. So in that first 30 days in prison, as you look for work and you assess what type of job you'd like to have or eventually have, you need to assess right now, do I want a job that is an hour or two a day that will provide more time to work on everything else I need to do? And I know the list is overwhelming because we've all been through a government investigation. We've all been to prison. Or do you want a job that's going to feel like 8, 9, or 10 hours a day just to feel busy, just to kind of make the time pass that doesn't really feel like you're in prison? Scott or Sam or anyone who's been to prison, can you perhaps touch on that? Scott, how long your job was, and we're going to get into the reputation management stuff in a minute.
Sure.
But how long was your job? What did you see with some other guys who might have found work that was, a little bit more time?
I like the advice of following a job trying to find a job wherein you have more flexibility over your schedule. For me, when I got there, they were keeping everyone inside all day because of COVID lockdowns. So I actually elected for a job in horticulture. And in that regard, we went out, we were gardening, raking leaves, planting flowers. And what it did for me was it got me out of the compound and got me out on the compound and kept me sane. There was a benefit to that job, though. There was enough inmates in it that if you wanted to sit at your desk and work all day and go out for only 15 minutes and work on the yard, you could do that as well. So again, on the flip side, I saw people become orderlies and they only had to work for 15 minutes a day. And these guys, I don't know how they could do it. They could sleep 12 hours a day. They could watch TV for about 6 hours a day. The other 3 are spent eating. And before you know it, the whole day has gone by. So just be careful when you have a job that allows you a lot of flexibility, that you don't fall victim to the idea of just watching TV and sitting around all day complaining about where you are.
So as you assess that first month, now I understand some of you may need to work more to make more money. Unicor, I think you can make 150, a couple $100 a month. Some people are in a position where they don't have to make money again, or their business is waiting for them, where I can understand that everyone has different objectives and goals. My objective was to do my job, not pay someone to do it. People will give you an opportunity to do your job for a book of stamps, do your work. James, good to see you, by the way. If you ever want to chime in and jump in about your experience, but please do so. So people say, I'll do your job for a fee, do your job. But if it's going to be an hour a day, you need to focus on what you're going to do with the rest of your time, because if not, people literally it's like watching paint dry, waiting for mail call, waiting for one day to turn into the next. I want you to be aware of that as you plan your day. As we talk about that first 30 days in prison, I'd like to talk about, I really encourage you to determine how frequently you're going to communicate with your family and your network and your probation officer, and potentially the work that your judge is going to see someday, presuming you want to get off probation early or travel or work for yourself. What record you are creating, the record that Ken began to create before sentencing. Sam had a horrific record before sentencing. He had to work to correct it, to improve it. Part of the reason he was able to work with our team because he corrected it, went down a different path. The first 30 days are crucial for that. So Scott, can you tell us the various ways that people will be able to communicate with people, and what are these mechanisms that exist to communicate?
The phone room is a great option, except your calls are limited to 15 minutes. There's usually a line, and people like to talk exceptionally loud in the phone room. So what I did was I found early Sunday mornings, great time to use the phone room. Saturday night, when everyone was in the TV room, a great time. Core Links is a nice system, but just be cognizant of the fact that everyone can read everything you're writing. I'll correct that. The staff members can. And the staff members aren't the reason you're in prison. So I'd always steer clear away from saying anything bad about them. They're there doing a job. They're not the reason that you're in prison. And then letters are great. People really like letters, and it's kind of a lost art. And I think there's something timeless and very calming about taking the time to sit down and write to family, write to friends, write to the people who wrote you character reference letters. Let them know what you're doing and how you're being productive. I found that to be a really a good use of my time.
So as we transition to the first month in prison and to demonstrate how everything is related, from how you prepare for sentencing, your probation interview, to sentencing, and what you convey to the judge, whether good or bad. If it's great, continue it. You told the judge you're going to do this, continue it. If you didn't do it, start it. If the judge thinks it's happy talk and you're saying it because it's what he or she wants to hear, demonstrate demonstrate how you're going to follow through. For example, Michael Santos was speaking in a penitentiary in Minnesota 2 days ago, and he asked a prisoner who's been in for 15 years, how many books did he read? And I think the prisoner said like 4,000 books, which is impressive. And Michael said, well, what did you learn from them? Have you written what you've learned with them? Have you shared them with your network? And the prisoner said, no. Most people would say no. Then Michael said, has anyone here just surrendered to prison? And some hands went up. And Michael said, how much stronger would you look at the end of your prison term if you read 100 or 1,000 books and you wrote why you read the book, how it helped you in prison, and how will it help you upon your release? Should you build that into your release plan that you could share with your judge or probation officer? And the person who read these thousands of books apparently said, yeah, that would have been a great strategy for me. I wish I knew. Doesn't change that he read all these books and learned from them, but it's a matter of showing, not telling, which is why when we come back to that first 30 days, while you may have a book schedule, which is great. And I just read a great book, by the way, called Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday, the Stoic. It's a really, really good book. It would help you in prison, I think. I encourage you to read it. But as you create your book schedule, I encourage you in that first month, every book you've read, to write a book report, to share it with your network, to build it into your release plan that we're going to transition to in like 5 or 6 minutes. Because judges expect you to tell them what they want to hear. Your network will be scared that you're in prison, so you've got to nurture it. There's myriad ways to do that as you work on your reputation or preparing for probation. Now, someone like Scott Laney went all in with a website. I'm not telling you need to have a website. I'm not telling you need to do that, but that was one approach for Scott Laney. Scott, I'm going to put up a screen share to your website.
Sure.
Can you talk about why you decided it would be a good idea to write so frequently at scottlaney.com?
I decided that I didn't like the narrative surrounding who I was, what had occurred. And of course, like anyone on this webinar or anyone really across the country who's about to report to prison, it's easy to say, I'm going to use my time in a positive way. I'll read, I'll work out, I'll work on myself. But to me, the question was really, where's the proof, right? Did any of those things happen if I didn't document that aspect of the journey? And while it may seem a long ways off, you will eventually come home and people will ask you, how was it? How was prison? We missed you. We're so happy to have you back. And what will you say? Right? I didn't want to have, a friend goes on vacation somewhere nice and you ask them, how was it? And they're like, oh, it was great. It was sunny. The ocean was pretty. I mean, what kind of an answer is that? I came back home and my community had spent hours and hours reading everything that I had written. I was getting letters from friends, emails, people asking me to call because they wanted to talk about the posts I had written and the book reports and the lessons I had learned. And what the website did for me is it has now changed the dialogue surrounding what happened to me. I came back home and it helped me hit the ground running. People had questions for me about the journey, nuances of the experience that they wanted to discuss with me. And they spoke at length about the book reports, and it ended up inspiring them to read the same books. And we're talking about the lessons learned and how this reading has helped us move forward in our lives. And for the same reason that defendants write a narrative to their sentencing judge, I ended up finding a lot of value in writing for myself and for people back home. And I think overall documenting the journey just played a large role in my successful outcome.
So a couple of thoughts on that. Thank you, Scott. And by the way, the beauty of this website, much like a sentencing narrative, it's a dynamic document. It will evolve and grow. The site that I maintained in prison, justinmaperney.com, that just had blogs, has now evolved over 14 years. But you know what's awesome? When someone will send a text message to Sam or me that says, I've been reading your blogs all night, they're helping me. And I'm like, which blog? And it's a blog that was written in May 2009. It's like, well, that's awesome. Google lives. It's out there. It's getting picked up. People are reading it. So this work is dynamic. It grows. In time, Scott may join, and Scott's joining our team. Is it more likely that his probation officer would allow him to work with felons if he's demonstrated why he's worthy of it? If you want to go work for a business or start a new business, is it likelier that it gets approved if you demonstrate to your probation officer why you're worthy of it? In prison, people used to say to me, dude, you will never work with felons. Are you crazy? You're insane. You owe money. It will never happen. I used to discuss that with Michael Santos. He'd say you can complain or you can believe it, or you can try to create a track record that demonstrates why. So when I met Isaiah Murrow, my probation officer in the filthy Halfwood house in Van Nuys, I didn't ask him permission. I demonstrated and showed him evidence of why I was worthy of it. And he said yes. So I'm not saying you need to have a website. You can have one made for about $12. Go to fiverr.com, sign in, have a website made by tomorrow for $100 to document your journey. Not hard. Go to Upwork, not hard. If you want it bad enough, you'll do it. Still, if you don't want to document your whole life online, that's fine. There are other ways that you can do it. Scott or Sam, how many people can you add to core links to your email in prison?
I believe 30 right now, 30 people.
And when you email people, are you allowed to email them at once, or is it like individual?
That
You can email multiple people at the same time.
Right. So here's what core links looks like. So let's just say I was going to go to send an email. I can click to add. I can send to multiple recipients. If you're in prison, can you send one email to everyone on your list?
Sorry, say that again.
If you're in prison, you're sitting down in prison, you want to send an email to everyone on your list. Can you just write one email and send it, or do you have to do it individually?
You can write one email and send it. You can add as many contacts as you want, up to your 30 contact limit.
All right, so here's an idea for everyone, presuming you want to get off probation early, work to repair your reputation, do everything that all of you want. If you don't want to do the website option like Scott did, or I did, or Michael Santos did, totally cool. How about that first month in prison, and this is why this whole mitigation arc ties together, as we talk about reputation management. How about you do this? You have 30 names on your list. How about every week, twice a week, you send a newsletter? Hey guys, love you, miss you. Let me tell you what I've done the last week and how I'm proving worthy of your love and support. I read this book. I did this. I did that. I'm working on this business plan. In fact, I'm attaching the business plan. I'd be so grateful for your feedback. I need mentors in here. I value your advice and tutelage. Will you please review this? Scott 7 minutes ago said staff can read the emails. Well, that can be both good and bad. It can be bad if you're an RDAP complaining about the program and how you got to do what you got to do to get the time off and you look inconsistent. It can be bad if you complain to family, who's then going to say this guy doesn't get it because it's harder on us managing the fallout with him in prison. So it can be bad if staff reads it. It could also be great. It could also be fantastic if staff is reading it, because you will be articulating what you're learning through prison. And guess what? Tell the staff that's in part because of the programming that you are going through. There are really good programs in prison, awesome programs that will help you. Give credit where credit is due. Thank them, acknowledge them if they're helping you. So I would encourage you, if you don't want the website function, once a week via core links, send an email to your network. How hard is that? Now, the problemo follows. If you're doing the same thing every day, which is what some dudes do, which is walking the track for 7 hours and watching a lot of TV, it's not going to be inspiring if you share that with people, because after about 3 messages, they're going to tune out and say, "I'll stop writing us." So that comes back to the idea of accountability, of encouraging the world to hold you accountable. And in so doing, as we wrap up reputation management and transition to the release plan, share it with your probation officer. Please. I'm going to say it for the 4th time, and some of you may text me and say, "Justin, twice was enough. 4 and 5 times is too many." I'm going to say it again. Chris Maloney, the former head of federal probation, told us they're going to reach out to the probation officer that interviewed you. Maybe they had a good or bad impression of you. You may have said things in that interview about your remorse, what you'll do moving forward, how you're going to make amends. Well, are you doing it? I don't know. If you do it in prison, it probably makes sense to share with your eventual probation officer. So when that eventual probation officer reaches out to the probation officer, he or she can say, "Justin Paperny shared this work with me," and look at the probation report to see if it aligns with the message. Or coming back to authenticity, how we opened the webinar, if you said something that was wrong, this is how I'm correcting the record. So write your probation officer from prison, share the newsletters, write a letter every 6 weeks or 8 weeks. What should be in the letter? Can anyone offer any insights into what should go into that letter, perhaps? Anyone want to jump in? I could talk for days. I won't. Any insights? Not, I can tell you. I'll tell you. It's your release plan. It's building and growing your release plan. If you watch the interviews with subject matter experts, your release plan should be completed before you surrender to prison, or not at least started. You start the release plan. It is a dynamic, growing document. You are going to share this release plan, presuming you want the best outcome, or try to. Can't guarantee it will happen. If your goal is to try and advance your agenda, you create this release plan before you go to prison. And inside of this release plan, let me try to pull it up here. 1 second. As you create this release plan, you are going to demonstrate what it is you're doing while you're in prison. So as I pull this up, Sam or Scott, Sam, you've seen Michael's 100 times. Scott, can you touch a little bit on why this release plan, Sam, is so vital in lieu of the First Step Act? I lose you? There you are. Sam, you're still on mute.
Yes.
We got a good flow here. We need you involved. Make it
Okay.
happen.
No, I just uploaded the template for the release plan, so everybody can understand what the template looks like. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. So I'm going to go through, but talk a little bit about it. What is it?
You are your own best advocate. You are the only spokesperson for yourself while you're in there. And as much support as you might get from our team and loved ones, it comes down to you and how you want to explain to usually an audience of 2, a counselor, a case manager, why you are worthy of the earliest possible release. And a release plan encompasses where you were, what you've been doing while you're in prison, how productive you are. Because one of the first things a case manager will ask you when you go into a meeting, which you'll have usually in the first 2 weeks, but more important, every 6 months until you're within a certain period of your release date, is, are you programming? So by saying to them or giving them a document, your release plan, which not only discusses, you understand what you did, you understand what got you there, that you haven't been sitting back watching TV while you're there, but let me show you what I've been doing. Let me show you how productive I've been. Let me show you the books I've read and what I've learned. Let me show you what work I've been doing. Let me show you what classes I'm taking. Because, and Michael has a great expression. Imagine driving down the road and on both sides of the road are a bunch of cows. Well, you're not going to notice the cows. You're going to drive right by. That's what it's like in prison. You're to a case manager, everyone is a cow, the same color. But imagine driving down the same road and seeing a purple cow. Well, now you're going to stop your car and say, wow, that purple cow stands out. When you're in prison, to the case manager, which is your first point of contact, who's going to consider your release dates, you need to be that purple cow and stand out. and producing a release plan that has everything as ministerial as a copy of your driver's license and where you're going to be living and are you insured? And what are you going to be doing when you go home? Do you have a job? Do you have a job planned? What have you learned while you're here? You need to be the purple cow to the case manager, which is considering when you can be released.
So that's well said, and that aligns with what subject matter experts have told us. It was, I believe, John Gustin, who ran the halfway house and reentry centers across the country, who told Michael in an interview that you can watch. Michael asked him, for someone who served 26 years in prison, what type of levels of liberty would that person have? And I believe John said, well, for someone who served that long in prison, you probably don't have the support network or a job lined up potentially. So there may be more supervision on you because of that. You don't have the network, the community, the support. You've been in jail for a long time. That's the perception. Yet look at what happened with Michael because of his release plan. He was able to switch districts from Northern California to Southern California. We got permission to work alongside yours truly, a convicted felon. He was able to immediately go into prisons and teach and inspire, and he accepted a position at San Francisco State to begin teaching as an adjunct professor, all by way of what he did in prison. Now, people have said to me, dude, I'm not serving 26 years like Michael. My release plan is not going to look like his. Okay, great. Make it as best you can. We're not comparing you to Michael Santos. He served a long time. He did a lot of great things. Focus on yourself. But if a subject matter expert we interviewed told us that the housing situation, support that you have at home is relevant, and if they may think because of your prison term, you ain't got the support, you don't have a job, you don't have the network, does it make sense to clarify or correct? Probably. So if I were you, especially in light of the First Step Act, I would create your reentry plan, and we're going to give you Michael's. We're going to give you both the Word document and PDF where you can create your own. We're giving it to you. You've got to do the work. And if you have specific questions, reach out to Scott or Sam, but we're giving it to you, but you got to sit down and do the work. Housing situation, describe the housing situation. Now you could say, like some people said in their probation interview, what was your upbringing like, good or bad? Is that all you have to say? Yeah, it was good or bad. What more do you want? Or, which some people do that, tragic but true, or you can explain the situation. What is the housing situation like? Be authentic if it's good or bad. If it's bad, why? What is the plan to make it better? If it's great and you have support, articulate why. You've got to share these details. Was Michael Santos stronger because he could articulate to his case manager that his wife, Carol, our partner, has a very successful career as a nurse, and they have a loving and stable home. And Michael has a huge support network of people vested in his success, people who are willing to offer him a job, like Lee Knobman at Golden State Lumber in Petaluma, California. Was he stronger because he shared all of it with the probation officer? Yes. Don't be any different. Please, please. So we're going to share this release plan with all of you and get into your background, your education, your employment. Now, this is a growing document, meaning if there are book reports that you've read, add them to the release plan. Why did you read them? If you have employment letters, add them to the release plan. How you cultivated this opportunity. I wrote employers from prison. I wrote my probation officer from prison. And yeah, there are cynics that are going to tell you it don't matter. Ain't nobody ever going to read it. I don't know. Like Ken said earlier, I had 15 letters. Maybe the letter from my employer helped. I don't know. All I know is the government wanted 71 months. He got 15 months in jail. Do all of it, please, because you got a family and they want you home. But what happens with people who get what they want, they're home more quickly from prison. They're like, oh, I'm struggling on probation. He wants me to work at KFC. Well, all work is honorable. You may not want to work at KFC. And many people look back and regret what they did in prison, which was getting a job for an hour a day and watching the Kardashians for another 12 hours. They didn't create the release plan. They owe money. No wonder your probation officer isn't approving the job. Do you think he's stupid? Would you approve it? Hell no. Show, don't tell. Write this release plan, presuming you want a better experience through the system. If not, then I know you do because you're on this webinar. You're more ahead than 99.9% of people who go through this. You're already there. Do more. There's saliva and spit flowing out of my mouth, but I'm trying to help here. I'm very passionate about this. So as we go through the release plan, there's basics here, identifying information, your prison card. I love how Michael inserts a photo of Carol and him from visitation. Great photo. Share it, display it, be proud of it. This is awesome. I mean, he did it through 26 years and we're handing it to you. We're begging you to do it. It costs you nothing but your time. So we're going to share this Word document in PDF with you. And I want you to get, it sounds crazy, I want you to get excited about it, but no one here has a life sentence. No one, everyone's coming home. All of you want to get out as quickly as possible. But the way you get out as quickly as possible is by doing this. And this is how I'm going to close. You're going to have a case. We talk about the first 30 days in prison. You're going to have what's called a team meeting the first month in prison. Let's talk about that team meeting quickly. Sam, when you go in for a team meeting, what do some prisoners do, and what are you advising people in our network to do?
So the first team meeting you have is usually within 2 weeks of showing up. And it lasts about 45 seconds. You go in, the case manager hands you a document, it's a computation sheet. They say, sign it and get out. That's just what happens. It's not because they're nice and they're not nice, they're pressed for time. There's too much going on and you haven't been there long enough to have a productive conversation as much as you would love to start a conversation with somebody. That's what we're used to, talking to people. It doesn't happen on the first meeting. The second one, depending upon your sentence, will either be 3 months or 6 months later. That is your opportunity to say now to the case manager, when she says or he says, all right, sign your form and get out. Hold on one second. Let me show you this. Let me show you my release plan. Let me show you what I've been doing. Here's a copy for you. If you're doing a website, you can say, let me show you how productive I've been. Go to my website right now. The better and more productive you are, and the better you make the case manager look to their superiors, the easier of a time you will have. Because as people are asking on the chat, yes, the case manager is your first point of contact that will determine when you are put in for home confinement halfway house.
So this is how I want to close this, and everyone knows this analogy. It's so cliched and kind of worn out, but it's a cliche for a reason. If any of you are married, you didn't walk up to your wife and say, hi, I'm Justin. I just got out of jail. Would you like to get married? She'd have probably, my wife, Sandra, would have called security. We met, we had a cup of coffee. We went for a walk with our dogs, Cody in Memphis. We had another walk. And, 9 years later, we're married. We got a couple of cute kids. The point is, you are nurturing a relationship with that case manager. Much like on a first date, you don't oversell it. Let's get married. She'd have called security. You are nurturing a relationship. You are nurturing a relationship. I just said it again, because I don't want you to oversell in that first team meeting. This is why I got sentenced, and this is what they're going to have your probation report. They're going to know why you're there. They're going to know the length of the sentence. They're going to know how much money's come in the first month. And if you've had $800 come in the first month, don't cry poor. And they're going to tell you, we're going to take more for restitution. Let them take it. First 30 days in prison, they will establish a payment plan. If you have a lot of cash coming in, expect them to take more. It's part and parcel to the process, especially if you owe money and you told the judge you're going to work to pay it back. Let them take it. Don't oversell it. Don't overdo it. You are nurturing a relationship. That's the mitigation arc. You are working your way to the top of that arc as you transition and scale your way down. It is okay in that meeting to say, I've been very productive while I'm here. I'm enrolling in as many programs as I can. And I am working every day to try to make amends. I did lose my career as a consequence of my bad choices. I don't have it all figured out yet, or this is what I'd like to do. Put it out there. Put out a vision. And then over the next 3 to 6 months before your next team meeting, this is why the first 30 days of your prison term are so crucial, because you're sowing seeds. They're going to see a few things. One, are you avoiding disciplinary infractions? Okay, are you avoiding trouble? 2, are you actually enrolled in programming? Okay, they may not tell you, but they're going to know if you watch TV and complain all day, if you're actually being productive in a quiet room and working. Whether they tell you or not, they know. They're smart. They know what you're doing. So everything you say, be prepared to back it up, or don't say anything. But if you say something you're not prepared to do, they're just going to say, here he goes again. Here he goes again, telling me what I want to hear, like a lot of federal judges tell us. So that's why you've got to show, just don't tell them. That's the team meeting. Lay out the agenda and then be prepared to show it with them in that next team meeting when you walk in with your release plan. And then it's going to build, it's going to grow, it's going to grow. That's the mitigation arc from where you are today and the pre-sentencing part of it, all the way to the other side of this journey. But it's what you do in between that will ensure whether it's 18 months in prison or a year in prison, whatever the length of sentence, if you prepare the way our team is encouraging you to prepare, you'll be different than a prisoner that says it's the case manager's fault. It's not. It's not your lawyer's fault. I know many of you want to better represent. I get it. Own it. Accept responsibility for your own life. And when I got that message, when our team follows that message, we get back on track and everything is better. But what we don't want is the last thing I'll say before I answer, we open it up to any questions. 20% of the people that reach out to us are home from prison, about 20%, maybe a little less now. The lion's share of them are struggling. I mean, really struggling. And when we ask what they did in prison, it's easier to understand why they're struggling. So Sam and I joke at times that people text us after the webinar, like, great webinar, or I wanted you to cover specifically how I can get out of prison on this specific date. Doesn't the CARES Act still exist where I can only serve 25% of my sentence if I have 18 months or less? That's all I care about. Okay. Can't guarantee that will happen. But what happens with a lot of the people who are home from prison, they did get out due to CARES, or they did get a year in the halfway house. They did get a year off for RDAP. There are people on 6-month sentences who are home in like 20 months. But because they didn't prepare properly, many of them are like, dude, this halfway house sucks. I think I wish kind of was back in prison right now, but I got to be here through May. And I'll say, so let me get this straight. You got what you wanted an earlier release date. And now because you're not prepared, you wish you were back in prison, walking the track and playing softball. Yes, I kind of wish I was back. Aha, be careful what you wish for. If you're not ready for the other side, this kind of amounts to a life sentence, which is what we get from a lot of the 20% of the people who reach out to us. They're struggling and they're depressed, and many of them regret what they did in prison. They don't have a release plan. They wasted their time in prison. They didn't nurture a network. They continue to say the same damn thing. That Department of Justice release, that DOJ release isn't true. That's the government's version of events. Yeah, no kidding. It's the government's version of events. Are you like Scott Laney that wanted to correct it? Or are you just going to, for the rest of your life, say you don't agree with their version? Well, I know you don't agree with it. But are you correcting it? Are you creating a new record? If you can do that, you advance your agenda. That's why you should probably start with Michael Santos's release plan. We'll get you the PDF and the Word document and build around. Don't plagiarize it. You can't write what he did. Build your own life, but it's a template for you to follow. That said, very grateful that you're all here. We're very passionate about helping all of you because we've been through it. Some did it better than others, but this is our life's work. As taught to me by Michael while I was in prison. I'm very grateful to be what I would consider his best ambassador. And it's a good thing he's not listening right now because he doesn't like when I talk about, he changed my life. This message changed my life and it enabled me to do what I love to do the day I got out of prison in 2009 in a very difficult economy, a recession, all because my probation officer, Isaiah Moreau, shook my hand and said to me, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do this. I think you've proved I'm going to give you an opportunity to do this. And if not, as I joke, I'd be doing something else that I wouldn't enjoy. That said, I see hands up. Let's start with Brian. Thank you all very much for joining. Brian, I see your hand up. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Justin. I had a quick comment, if you don't mind.
I don't.
Okay, Sam.
As long as it's a good comment. I'm just joking, please. We want to
Yes,
hear it.
Yes, sir. So Sam shared some information about meeting with the case manager. That's absolutely correct. I just want to caution people about some experiences I've had with the case manager. So when I first got there, the case manager was promoting halfway house. And when she puts me in or puts someone in for halfway house, she does not consider them or put their paperwork in for the Second Chance Act or the CARES Act. So be very careful if that case manager is forcing you or strongly suggesting you sign halfway house as soon as you get there in your first team meeting, because there was a guy there that had 15 months. He qualified for Second Chance Act. Since he signed his halfway house paperwork, she refused to put him in, and I ended up leaving on the Second Chance Act before him because I refused to sign the halfway house paperwork. So just be very cognizant of what you're signing when you meet that case manager.
That is, Brian, that's excellent advice. Thank you so much for contributing your wealth of knowledge. I'd love to maybe talk with you offline, and I'd love you to continue to contribute to these webinars. That's very good information. Thank you for sharing it. And I know some people are going to have questions about that, so I want to discuss that further. Thank you. Jason, I see your hand up. Jason, you there? Oh, I think you're on mute. I think you're on mute, Jason. We can't hear you. Okay, I think Jason's trying to reach out to us. While Jason's figuring that out, I see some questions along the right. Should I write to the previous probation officer who interviewed me before sentencing? Here's some advice that I have. While you're in prison, we have had people in our community reach out, write letters to their sentencing judge, write a letter to the probation officer, presuming it's the right message. We have known people in our community who wrote a letter to their judge articulating how grateful they were at getting a great sentence and how they're working every day to prove worthy of it. If it's the right message and it's not, as Michael would say, happy talk, what's the downside in sharing with stakeholders what you're learning and how you're working to become better? So no, I see no downside in it, presuming it's the right message. Someone asked, I'm confused about the halfway house document the case manager asked you to sign. What is it exactly? What did it say? We'll come back to that. Someone said,
I think Jason's got his voice going.
okay,
Jason,
Jason, go ahead.
you're off again.
How about now?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Man, crazy. This is not an old dude's world. Two things. One is that what is Unicore?
Unicore is a government, it's Sam, maybe you can describe it better. It's a government run.
Unicore is
the
the
job where they contract out. Go ahead, Sam.
right. In other words, they make all the uniforms for inmates. They build all the furniture for the GAO, for any government facility. So it's a large warehouse manufacturing facility that is not on every campus. It's not on, there was one at Miami, but I don't know if there's one like Scott at Yankton. It varies by facility, and if they have it. But keep in mind also that you're going to Montgomery. The nice thing about Montgomery is, like similar to Pensacola, you're on a military base. So because you're on a base, you're going to have access to work opportunities on the base. I mean, it might be painting or landscaping, but you're going to have access to getting off the camp grounds. Unicore is the best job. It's kind of more difficult to get into because it is the highest paying job, and each facility might or might not have it.
Unicore is it is a place to make more money, and also some Lompoc camp that used to have RDAP closed to make room, I believe, for Unicore. So there's no camp in California that has RDAP, unfortunately. But Unicore is a big program. I believe you also get First Step Act program for working in Unicore, isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, so those things are important as well. Let's see, we have a lot of questions.
Okay, and the other thing is that for you, Justin, I was sorry to hear about Honey.
You read my book. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I did. Front to cover. So you don't have to. There's no. There was no. I sat and read it because it was just great reading, guys. You guys hadn't. Some of you guys that are not on call, definitely read this. Lessons from Prison with Justin. It's a great book, great read.
Well, that book is, thank you. The book is free. I worked on it with Michael while I was in prison. There's no cost to the book. We can send it to you. And also I encourage you to go through even the resource page on Prison Professors, where we have a whole library of books. And while everything we do, we give it away for free. If any of you bought a book and whatnot, it supports the nonprofit, which helps us hire subject matter experts like Chris Maloney, John Gustin, Hugh Hurwitz. So if you go to the resource page on Prison Professors, there's a myriad books there written by Michael. So thank you for saying that. If anyone would like Lessons from Prison, happy to send it to you at no cost. To the question of, can you create a website yourself if you don't have internet, or do you get someone outside to create it for you? It can be created in prison. That was the case with me. In my, you can create it before you go in, and then you could email the blogs just via core links. You can handwrite the blogs. That's what I did in prison because there wasn't email. And my mom, who occasionally took some editorial, she did a little bit of rewriting unbeknownst to me, would just post them. So you can create it now. That'd be better than doing it while in prison. And it's just a great idea. But I want you to be careful if you commit to a website of how much you're going to commit to writing. Don't say you're going to do it every day and you do it once a week. Just do it in a schedule that you can maintain. Scott was very aggressive with his writing. He wrote book reports, a lot of blogs. It helped him feel productive and learn, and he could share that work with his case manager. So if you do it, just make sure you lay out a vision that is realistic. Someone put here, Michael White website. That's awesome. owningmymistakes.com. I'll definitely check that out, Michael. Congratulations. That's awesome that you've done that. I love it. Can't wait to see it. That is fantastic. Update on First Step Act credits. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week. I want to have a conversation about that with Michael. We're going to cover that tomorrow. These webinars are recorded, so I'm not ignoring the question. I just want to always have the most up-to-date information before we respond. So we'll cover that tomorrow. And if you miss it, we'll send out the recording. Rich, I see you have a question. I see you're driving Nebraska. It looks cold there. Talk to me.
Yes, just real quick before my question, I am doing the, I've been getting back my character reference letters and they've been really good. And I'm working with Brad on my personal narrative. So just a testimony that those things are working and they're turning out well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Question is about programming. I know we talk a lot about the programs available in the classes and you have a job. From a practical standpoint, what is it like in the real world where you have a job in the BOP and that they're all in the evenings, or?
Oh no, the jobs vary throughout the day. Some people are bakers at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. Others may, I did pots and pans and lunch in the evening. Others may work for an hour in recreation. So the jobs are going to vary all throughout the day, if I heard that correctly. The compound closes around 9 p.m. We have someone in our community whose job, he loves it actually. He goes to the higher security prison to clean that visitation room. And he emailed to tell me like one of the best parts of his day, I think it's like a 7 or 8 block walk from the camp to the low security prison. He feels free while he's walking. He's in the higher security prison. Then he feels grateful once he gets back to the camp because he sees the razor coil and like barbed wire and all that stuff. So he's like, hey, I love going back to the camp because I've been in the low working. So to answer your question, there are myriad jobs throughout the day, from the morning till night. By the way, we talk about having to go to the kitchen for 120 days in a lot of prisons. It could actually be a great job. I kind of liked it. I just didn't want to do the buffet or be a baker at 4 a.m. I was running, a lot of people exercise, you get extra food if the correctional officer is willing to give it to you, which many of them are. So you're going to find a job, but even if the first job isn't the one you love, you'll be able to eventually work your way into a job. Also in the first 30 days, you may not love there's so much we can discuss. You may not love your bunk. You may be in the front of the dorm. How you adjust, are you clean? Do you keep it tidy? Could influence moving to the back of the dorm to get a better bunk. We could talk about this for days, but it's all correlated. A good job in bunk can help set the tone in prison. Let's see, are books the only thing we can send to inmates? You can send them money, you can send them books, you can send them cards, you can send them letters, but other than that, you can't send them shoes or a TV and whatnot.
Actually, Justin, that changed.
Oh,
First of all,
you can send TVs?
no, that changed. You can't don't start sending money to people in prison. You have to do it to their commissary account on through Western.
That's what I meant. Thank you. So at Prison Professors, this is why everything you possibly could need, I have great news. It's all here. So that's why even at Prison Professors, there's one thing we're not lacking, and that is best in class content. and it's for you. So even if you go to like before sentencing, we talked about the narrative, all that, the mitigation arc. Tomorrow we'll go through a demonstration of the calculator, but you're going to see at prison professors after sentencing, you're going to see how to send money. Here it is, how to send money to people in prison. There it is, demonstration of how to send it. It's all here, okay? So I don't want you to worry about that, but no, you can't. I've been to a state prison where they can get like care packages and things like that. That's not going to be the case there. What I
Also,
would
no more
encourage you-
cards. No more
What was
cards.
that?
They stopped any colored, and Scott might have had it more than me, but when I was there, they stopped any colored letters, colored paper, cards, because people were like putting Suboxone like stuff in the cards, medicine. So my experience now is, and again, I defer to Scott or Brian, a simple white envelope, white paper, 5 pages, blue or black ink.
Even along that lines at my camp, they just started giving us photocopies of everything. So someone could have sent in a card. It's all pretty frilly, all these colors. It doesn't matter. You're getting a black and white photocopy of it. That the policy may be different at other camps, but I agree with you, Sam. Keep it simple.
Now, that 1 second, everyone. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that when someone asks about, there are some more questions here I wanted to ask about specific programs at Cumberland. We can look into some of those things. We've certainly had clients go to Cumberland. Would you talk about the women's camp? We'll cover more of that tomorrow. Lida, thank you for asking. And there are many similarities, though of course there are some differences because there aren't as many female prisons, but the adjustment pattern of looking for work, creating the release plan, avoiding problems, it's applicable anywhere, though certainly there are nuances.
Can I ask a question, Justin?
Yes.
And maybe Scott, somebody might know this, because I just got a question. Are people allowed to bring service dogs to visit? I don't remember if they were allowed to in Miami, but are you familiar with that, Scott? Anybody?
Boy, I would be surprised if they allowed that. You could always call the institution and ask, but I could see you even getting approval for that. And then the CO who's on staff that day decides they don't want to do it. So I would try to lean against anything that overcomplicates a visit.
Yeah, we've covered this previously. We're going to cover it again. I had a great conversation with Michael Santos earlier today. And we're going to kind of talk about going back to the beginning of these webinars and starting from scratch with preparing for your surrender to prison. Because every time we do it, we're learning more, so it's updated. I want to share this comment that really kind of made me smile and gave me some chills. That I won't start. I can't wait to share it with Michael because it really attests to the value of the nonprofit and of giving everything away. Sorry, at first I thought this was just paid advertising for your paid work. Also that you were too white with the white collar info, etc. Wanting more people with money. So sorry. You give free S. LOL. Love it. You're all beautiful and awesome. Having my son now in prison, I can of course attest that prisoners can be the best of people. That's why when the comment means a lot to us. I've attended webinars where it's nothing more than like a sales pitch, or at the end, speak to so-and-so or sign up for a program. That's really not the goal here. I do run white collar advice. Certainly some people in that community retain our team to do certain work, but we really want to stress we're giving you the best that we have. White collar advice is probably the biggest sponsor of prison professors. So like any revenue, a good portion of revenues that come in, we're using to subsidize these webinars, hiring experts that are not inexpensive to get information for all of you. So that comment really made our day, and it proves our point that we've nothing to sell you other than teaching you how to traverse what is a very difficult system. So that comment made my morning. Thank you very much.
Hey, Justin, can I add something, please?
Yes.
So you wouldn't know this because Michael did the last one, but my sentencing date was moved from December 15th to January 10th. And the reason I was able to move that is because Sam and Larry put together a letter for me, and also Larry wrote the order that we sent to my attorney to be able to give me a 3-week medical extension because my physicians wanted me to finish this, rehabilitation piece before I go in. So I just wanted to say all that to say with the folks that are not part of our community that are thinking about it. Yes, you can get every information that you ever want about going to prison with prison professors, but there's nothing like that one-on-one with the Sam and Larry and Scott and white collar team. So don't overlook that. I appreciate it, man.
I appreciate you very much for saying that, whether you work with our team or it's these webinars. The goal is embedded in Michael's 26-year journey through federal prison, the lessons learned. And I think if you look at the impact that he's beginning to have, it's all a testament to what he did while in custody. So I know thankfully none of you are going to serve 26 years, but if it's 2 years or 6 years, whatever the number is, the roadmap is there. And we beseech you, we urge you to follow it, because life can be beautiful with a felony conviction. It sounds crazy, and I know none of us wish we were here, and I'm certainly not Anthony Robbins serving just 1 year in a camp, but I look at lessons learned, how I documented them and worked to change the narrative. And some of the lessons I learned, damn, I say it was kind of worth it, despite a lot of struggle over the years. And I attribute that to Michael, and it's the same lesson as his ambassador that I'm sharing with you. And it's a privilege to do that. There is one question Sam or Scott, maybe you can touch on, and Brian addressed this, and it might have created a question from someone where they asked about, I am confused about the halfway house document the case manager asked you to sign. What is it exactly? What did it say? So Scott or Sam, in a meeting with a case manager, there may be a document they ask you to sign. I've been out of prison too long. I think I've forgotten.
I didn't have that because I went right to home confinement. I avoided the halfway house. So I spent 14 months on home confinement. But again, each facility is different. Scott, or I guess Brian, who had that happen, what's your experience?
I can speak to it. I think there's a little bit of inmate.com behind this.
What is it? What is it, inmate.com?
Explain that.
Sure. Inmate.com is the rumor mill of inmates at your prison, and you all will be astounded at how quickly a rumor can get started and spread through the entire institution. This rumor, if you will, is your case manager will try and get you to sign release paperwork very early in the process that locks you into a certain amount of halfway house or home confinement and a certain release date, thereby removing you from eligibility for CARES Act, more time on the Second Chance Act, additional First Step Act. We had this go through our institution and it wasn't the case. I had a release date and then it changed. Lawrence, I think that's addressing what you're talking about. But again, these are nuanced aspects of it that everything won't always work out the way someone says it might.
Yeah, and we always try.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, excuse me. I apologize for cutting you off there. And I agree with him. It differs from facility to facility. Just in my experience, the case manager told me, verbatim that, hey, the paperwork is too difficult and I'm just not going to change it once I put you in and you've received your halfway house date. I don't see what was difficult about, just changing some paperwork if it was the process of getting sign-offs again or what, but that was something that she actually said, to me directly.
Thank you. And what we can just, we can cover more of this. I think one last point I want to make, I saw a question. Someone asked about, there's a lot here. But it was something like, can you get more halfway house time? Like, how does that work? Is it up to a case? Oh, so case managers have the power to get you released earlier outside of things like the First Step Act. So there are a number of factors that may include how much halfway house time you may get. For example, Chris Maloney in that interview about federal probation discussed, how many open beds there are in the country in these halfway houses. I think it was something like 7,000, like that. So they're going to assess what halfway house are you going to, availability in that halfway house. Have you had disciplinary infractions in prison? Perhaps any health issues that may warrant an earlier release? All of that should be in the probation report. You could argue if you've adjusted well and you've avoided problems, a sympathetic case manager may put you in for more time. But there's no doubt that we've known people. I share this story with someone who worked in our community. You may know the name Craig Carton. He's a talk show host in New York. He used to be on with Boomer Esiason, and he went to prison. On a 42-month sentence, Craig did incredibly well while in prison. Yes, he went through RDAP. He got the time off, but he did jobs. He mentored. He taught. He gave back. He never complained. was appreciative of the programming that he went through, you know, and just like that, he got 11 months in the halfway house. That was somewhat subjective. Some people get more or less than others. So I know in my situation, I got 3 months, some people got 18 months. So yes, can't guarantee that a case manager may put you in for more, but in a situation like
Hello?
and he happened to get more time. But here's the point, even if he didn't get more time, he still had a phenomenal experience through prison because he was contributing and giving back. He wasn't counting the minutes, and it just so happened that helped him get more time. Selena, I see your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, thank you for joining.
Hi, I just had a quick question about the PDFs that you were talking about. Can we get a copy of that, or are you gonna send a link?
I'll send it to you right now, Selena.
Well, I think
Okay.
what I will do, you have my word, it's 10 o'clock. I'm running to, if you have my word that by tomorrow, I will send everyone the reentry plan from Michael Santos, both the PDF and the Word document. So Sam, rather than sending it to everyone individually, that could take some time because there are so many people in our community. You have my word that I will send it to everyone by the webinar tomorrow morning, okay?
Okay, and do we draft it, and can I send it to Sam or?
So I'll let Sam, I guess, address how to manage that. Perhaps, Sam, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because how we would manage that.
So Selena, that's a question that really needs to be addressed with Larry. I just sent you some information. You worked with Larry. So my suggestion is after this call, give Larry a call. Since he's in, he heads client relations and operations. Why don't you touch base with Larry and he can kind of walk you through all of that.
Yeah, but to answer your
Okay.
question, answer your question, we'd like to review it, and we can offer some insights on that and go through it. And Michael's is a very good gauge and guide for you. But I want to stress, never forget, it's a growing document. The whole thing shouldn't be completed because it's going to grow in prison. It's going to grow on probation. I want you to be aware of that, but certainly we'll review it and we'll get you a draft of it.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Short of that, are there any other questions that we haven't answered? Do I see any hands up? Ron, would you be available to talk in a little bit if I called you in like 15 or 20 minutes? Perfect. Calling in a little bit. Thank you very much. Short of that, Jason, thank you everyone for continuing to join. It's very great to see many of you who are new to our webinar. And I know I present a little differently from Michael, but I'm just so grateful to lead it. We're going to do it again tomorrow with similar subjects. This, of course, will be recorded. And with that said, I hope all of you have a really wonderful Friday. And we're just so grateful that you're letting us educate and guide you through this very difficult experience. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. You're welcome. Bye-bye.